Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of the Live Your Jam podcast. Today's episode is a solo one, just you and me. I'm going to talk about transitions today, the big ones, the ones that reshape who you are. And I'm going to share some of my own stories around transitions because I've had quite a few. And this will be a way that I can illuminate the research and actually share how we move through change. Life's biggest transitions, career changes, empty nest, moves, divorce, motherhood or fatherhood evolving, are almost always accompanied by friction and often just a little bit of mess. And that friction isn't a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that something real is happening. And this episode explores how to move through transitions with intentionality, self compassion, and clarity. And I'm going to use some of my own stories as the guide. So here's what I want to offer you today. The mess isn't a mistake. The friction that you feel in transition is not a sign that you're failing. It might actually be a sign that you're right where you need to be. But before we dive in, I want to give you a quick roadmap of where we're going to go today because this episode has 5 distinct parts and I want you to be able to follow along. We're going to start off with the research, specifically a framework called the Bridges Transition Model that changed how I understand what happens to us when we go through change. I use change models often. Change management is a big part of organizational development, which is the field that I've been in for the last 25 years. But this model is a simple one and it works really well for systems and for individuals. And the big idea here is that change and transitions are not the same thing. And once you understand the difference, so much of what you're feeling starts to make sense. So from there, we're going to talk about self-care during transitions and when I mean that very specifically, meaning you need to take care of your body, right? And your mind. How you take care of yourself during a hard season in life directly affects the quality of the decisions that you'll make. And I'll share what the research says about that as well. Then I'm going to get personal. I'll walk you through some of the transitions, like I said, that I've experienced: a career change, a move abroad, divorce, and what it looks like to reimagine motherhood when your kids are grown and you're parenting from afar. So, real stories, real friction, and real gifts on the other side. And then I'm going to give you some practical tools that you can actually use right now. Yes, I like practical things we can take away. And then we'll close with what I think is the deepest truth about change. The self who navigates the transition may not be the same one who completes it. So this is critical. Like, we get changed from the inside out. And then we're going to talk about why reflection matters here and why some people miss that gift entirely and what it looks like to let the transition actually change you as opposed to forcing your way through it. So let's go. And before we do, everybody, please, if you could write me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, when you go into the episode and look at it, please send me a review. Live Your Jam podcast is almost a year old. This is the 22nd episode. In August, we'll have the 24th. I do them bi-weekly. So yeah, it's crazy. I'm going to send out in my newsletter something about that. But if you could please leave me a review, I would really appreciate it. If you're enjoying the podcast, if you're not, maybe don't leave me a review. No, all feedback is good, but maybe don't put it in the review. Send it to my email, ellen@liveyourjam.com. All right. So let's get started with the research. What we know about transition. So this is the Bridges transition model. It was a consultant that comes from the Bay Area where I am. He developed this in 1991, and it's really simple. It's one of the most useful frameworks I've come across for understanding transitions. And he made a distinction, and I already talked about this earlier in the intro, but he said that change and transitions are not the same thing. Change is the actual external event. You get the divorce papers, you accept the job offer, you drop your kid off at college and drive away. That's the change, and it can happen in a moment. And transition, on the other hand, is what happens inside of you. It's the internal psychological process, what's happening in your heart and your mind as you make sense of the change. And sometimes these transitions take a long time. So there's 3 stages in the Bridges model. The first stage is ending, losing, and letting go. So Bridges said this, and it's almost poetic, really, is that every transition begins with an ending. That's the change that comes in. Not a beginning, but an ending. Before anything new can start, you have to be grieving. You have to grieve what you've been leaving behind or what you are leaving behind. That the identity, the version of yourself that fit in that old life. And this is where most of us get tripped up because we want to rush past the ending and get to the good part. But if you skip the grief or the reflection or looking at the ending and who you were in that and how moving forward it might not longer serve you, you just drag that old you into the next chapter. And I think we've seen many people do this. And the second stage is the neutral zone. This is the transition, the in between place. The old is gone, but the new isn't here yet. So Bridges called this the neutral zone. We see this with children, actually. When you see them going for an object relations theory in the beginning, most children think they're their mother, or the object that's caring for them. And when they start to realize they are separate self, they're a separate self, that's when the transitional object comes in, the blanket or the baby or the lovey that they want to hold on to. That keeps them safe because they're stepping away from mom. They're learning how to walk, they're moving forward. I won't kill you with all of that detail, but it's an interest. Humans have the same thing. When we're going from one thing to another, the in between part is the hardest part because it's disorienting and uncomfortable part of the transition. But here is the cool thing, it is also the most creative because you get to pick what you're going to do next and who the new you that you want to emerge is. So, and Bridges compared the neutral zone to the wilderness. And I like that metaphor, obviously, because I love the wilderness. And when you're out in wilderness, you don't have your usual landmarks. You might feel a bit lost, but it's also where new clarity and newfound creativity can emerge if you let it. So, and then the third stage is the new beginning. This is where you emerge. You start to know what your new role is, your new identity, and your new normal, and your energy returns. But Bridges was clear, you can't force a new beginning. And we all know this, right? It arrives when you're ready, and that timeline is different for everyone. So I want to talk about right now. So that's the model, the ending, the neutral zone, and then the new beginning. And that's a very simple way to look at change. And recognizing when you're in it can be very, very helpful. There's also things that you can do self care wise when you're in transition. I take transitions seriously because I know that a new part of myself is emerging. And I want to be careful about how I construct that new part. I just don't want to waste the opportunity. And also, a lot of the transitions I've been in are quite difficult. So I know that there's learning there for me. And that's the friction that I'm talking about too. So here's something fascinating. The instincts that served me during my divorce and also my move to Switzerland, but really I want to talk about the divorce one right now, were the instincts that served me were daily exercise, cutting out alcohol, eating clean, prioritizing my sleep. These weren't just good habits. They're exactly what the research recommended. And there's a lot of science out there now to help people navigate major life transitions. So I'm just going to talk about those. Physical self care is a cognitive strategy. When we're in transition, our stress hormones are elevated. Cortisol clouds the thinking, it disrupts our sleep, and it makes emotional regulation harder. Exercise is one of the most powerful antidotes to that. It literally helps the brain process stress, and it gives you a sense of agency and control at a time when things feel out of your control. So I found routine, getting up in the morning and exercising consistently very helpful to me. It was the one thing that I felt a little more in control, and it also felt good for me. So researchers have studied this, and researchers have studied coping during life transitions, and they identify that regular physical activity is a top predictor of resilience. It's not just about your body, it's about your mind's ability to stay clear. I talked about this in the last episode, the second one in terms of self-care, and that's that alcohol and big decisions don't mix. I don't think alcohol is good during transitions. I mean, there maybe be a stereotype out there is like somebody gets divorced and then they're out there getting wasted all the time and drinking away their sorrows. I don't know. I mean, certainly some people go to alcohol as a coping mechanism. It sounds obvious and it's worth saying out loud, but it's a depressant, and people have shame and anxiety after they drink. I just don't think it's a good idea. So during a time when you need to be making clear-headed choices and actually feeling good at yourself because you feel unmoored, I think alcohol is just keep it out. Don't, if you can have a glass or something, but don't overdrink or try to say no to it, because it helps. Taking it out during a time of change can really help you stay in the driver's seat of your own life. And besides, emotions are going to come up and we want to be able to deal with them, not push them down. And alcohol can do that. And it creates actually kind of sometimes more problems. The third thing is sleep is non-negotiable. The sleep is so important. We know this. When we're sleeping, That's when the brain can consolidate memory, process emotions, and literally clears out the stress hormones. So when we're anxious or grieving, sleep is often the first thing to go. I remember when my father passed, I really did not sleep well for a few weeks and I had to start taking melatonin, which then made me have these hallucinations, but it was very difficult. So it's a real time to protect it. So I say to people, don't do as much if you can and really focus on your sleep. You have to start taking naps, get an aura ring, or even your watch can help you, but really prioritize it. So it's really good for emotional regulation. It's kind of foundational during transitions. The fourth thing is mindfulness and staying present. One of the core challenges when we're in a transition is our mind is simultaneously grieving the past and anxious about the future, right? So mindfulness will keep you in the present moment. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day help anchor you in the present, which is the only place where really clear decisions that can be made. So mindfulness is really just I talk about this in my book, Living from the Inside Out. It's really focusing on what you're doing. So if you're cooking, focusing on that. If you're driving, focusing on kind of the road and what you're doing and while driving as opposed to letting your mind wander. Fifth thing you can do is find your support system. So, research shows that the quality of your support, not the quantity, predicts how well you move through transitions. Just pick one person who truly sees you and can sit in the discomfort with you is way more powerful than 10 people offering advice. I'm not saying you need to ask this person for advice. I think just asking them to listen to you and be present. You just have one person. I also encourage this so much for young men because I think it's really important that they are able to express their feelings. So if they just have one person that they can share what's going on that doesn't offer advice, it's really important. I did this. I was miles away when I got a divorce, but I have a handful of people that I can really tell what's going on. I usually process and then share with people. I don't really often need to share in the moment anymore because I'm able to handle that myself. But nonetheless, it's really important. And don't go blabbing your stuff out there. It takes energy to share your story, and it takes energy for people to listen to it, so I recommend being very mindful on who you pick for your support system. What do I do with that now? And then choose self-compassion, that's number 6 over self-criticism. Dr. Christian Neff's research showed that self-compassion, treating yourself the way you treat a dear friend, predicts well-being during transitions better than self-esteem or optimism. So your inner voice during transitions matters enormously. Are you being harsh with yourself or kind? I always use this coaching question with people. I say, "Well, what would you tell a friend who's in the same predicament?" One thing was when we were in Switzerland, we were taken advantage of, unfortunately, by our landlords that at our first housing place there. They came off as very friendly, they lived next to us, and the Swiss aren't really known for being friendly. They're actually formal and proper, and they're lovely, but they're not friendly like Americans are, and they don't really engage in small talk. And so our landlords were very atypical. They were very friendly to us, and I was new to the country. My ex-husband was working. My job was to integrate the family, learn the language, learn the way around, and actually start to establish relationships so our family can have community and feel a part of the culture there. So landlords were very nice, overly nice, and they had an ulterior motive. They were nuts, to be honest, and I was the kind of conduit. They came to me all the time. I was home with the kids. They had grandkids that came in from the States. We did things with them. I thought it was all great. It turned out it wasn't great. They were being manipulative and we had to get in a legal situation with them. But I did blame myself. I kept saying to myself, how could I? It was messy. How could I get in this situation where they befriended us and then they were trying to legally take advantage of us through our rental contract? And I finally just said to myself, what would you say to a friend where this happened? Because I'm like, "Oh, if I wasn't as nice to them or I wasn't as" I was, "Come on, Ellen. It's okay." Like, people are nice to you in a new country, seemingly nice, and took advantage of you. There's nothing wrong with you didn't do anything wrong. So I share that because the inner voice there got to me. And then what happened is the mama bear in me came up because they were trying to hurt my family. Seriously, for me, all bets were off because if you're gonna threaten my kids and my family and our well-being, I'm not going to back down. It just won't. So we ended up in a legal battle with them. So that was it's interesting. I'm okay with it. It's a blip. Anyway, so I want to talk about the next thing about empty nesting because that is a huge transition. So if your kids are off to college or their adult children who have moved away, I think it's really important to talk about this because so many listeners are in this situation that right now they're of my age, they're either approaching or in the empty nest. So when your kids leave home, something shifts that's hard to name. You're proud, incredibly proud, but there's also grief, loss, a kind of silence in the house that feels strange in your body. And sometimes you feel guilty or sad, potentially when your child is driving. I don't know. Some people do. I don't feel that way. But I moved away from my children. I do have moments of sadness because my heart hurts because I wish I were closer to them. I know this is the best thing for me right now, but I can understand the emotional toil of being this unit and always having these people around that really kind of make your life feel loving and whole, and you get so used to that, and then they go off and you're like, "Well, what do I do with that now?" So research confirms that what you might already be feeling, that the empty nest is one of the most complex emotional transitions parents, especially mothers, navigate. Studies describe it as a mixture of joy and sadness, of pride and loss all at once. One researcher described it as bittersweet. I think that's a great term for it, and that word feels right. What the research also shows is that emptiness is a profound opportunity for identity rediscovery. Who were you before you became that mom or dad? Who do you want to be now? And what parts of yourself got set aside that might be ready to emerge? I'm doing a whole workshop on this in September. You can find it on my website, but I think it's a real opportunity. What I see, unfortunately, is people still clinging to the mother role. Oh, hand wringing, and I miss them. And I really think it's okay. What do you want to do now with your life? Who are you, and what part of yourself do you want to express? So, for those of you who are parenting from a distance, whether that's physical distance or emotional distance because your children are growing into adults and emotionally they don't need you anymore, this transition also requires reimagining what being a great mother looks like now. And that role doesn't end, it evolves. So, what I think my role of motherhood now is yes, I'm there to emotionally support them. Yes, financially help them. Yeah, so I'm at this stage in my life where I recognize that the best thing that I can do for my boys is to show them what a strong, independent woman looks like who's pursuing her own goals in her own life. And of course, I want them to be a part of that. But this is my time to recreate myself, and they get to see a version of me that just isn't their mother who's constantly putting them before myself. So here's what I really want to say to you, and I want you to hear this clearly. This is your moment, not in a selfish way, not in a forget everyone else way, but in the most essential soul level way. For years, maybe decades, you have organized your life around another person's or other people's needs and around their schedule, around another person's becoming. And that was beautiful and that was right. And that was the work and it was needed at the time. But empty nesting is the season for shifting. And the question that's sitting right in front of you now, whether you've named it or not yet, is who are you when you're not in service of somebody else's life? What do you want? What do you need? What have you been quietly setting aside, waiting for that right moment, which turns out to be right now? So I would encourage everybody to take advantage of that. One of the biggest mistakes we make in the empty nest tradition or transition, sorry, is treating it like a footnote, like something to get through. We stay busy, we fill the calendar, we redirect our attention to our partner, our work, our friends, anything to avoid sitting in the quiet that the empty creates. And I understand that. The quiet can be disorienting. It can feel like loss because it is loss and it deserves to be felt. But what I have learned and when I'm trying to help other people understand is on the other side of that quiet, if you're willing to sit long enough, there's something waiting for you. A version of yourself that wants to do the things that you want to do, a life that you want to build, not around anyone else's needs, but your own and from the inside out. So I have a workshop. You can check it out on my website. It's called The Courage to Lead from Within, where I'm addressing this in a 7-week program. I'm so excited about it. It comes out in September and registration's in August. You can go to my website and look at it all. But I think it's really important is that that we talk about what is in these transitions, how do we intentionally recreate ourselves? because I know that the empty nest or whatever transition you're in is not the end of your story. It's not even the beginning of the end. If you're willing to do the work, it can be one of the most significant invitations your life will ever offer you. The invitation to finally fully become yourself. So I want to talk a little bit about changing careers. I mean, career transitions are one of the most studied forms of adult transitions. They happen to all of us. They can happen to all of us. Certainly job transitions, career transitions can too. But researchers find that the biggest predictor of success isn't knowing what's next. It's having a strong sense of your own values. When you know what matters to you most, you can make the next decision even without the full picture. So there's 2 ways I wanna illuminate this. One is I switched from a career in finance to a career in organizational development, and I went back to graduate school, and then I went out on my own. I chose at that time not to work for a corporation after graduate school in OD. I set up my own private practice, which was a huge risk and also meant delayed money, right? And because I wasn't gonna be working for a corporation, I had to go out and earn it. So I didn't have a client right away, I had to find one. But my values at the time were to be closer to my family. I was 40 at the time. I had 2 young kids, and I had a lot of business experience. And my values were to have a flexible work schedule so I could devote time to my family. And I also wanted to be able to choose the work that I wanted. I didn't want to work for a corporation and then them kind of telling me what initiatives I could work on. I wanted to work on a bunch of different ones and decide what my portfolio and skill set was going to be. Those were value-based decisions. They weren't financial ones at the time. They were about what mattered to me. And I stuck to that. It took a little bit longer, clearly, to bring money in than it might have for somebody who got hired day one at a corporation. But I think when you know what matters to you, you get to make the next decision even without the full picture. And I want to share that's something that I did and I held myself to. It would have been much easier in the short term to go and get a job. But what I decided was that I wanted to set up a private practice. And that took a little bit more time, and ultimately, it was I had more business, I had enjoyed it thoroughly, I got to try different things, and I really stuck to what mattered to me, even though in the beginning it was quite hard, as I mentioned. The other thing is another transition story is moving to Switzerland. I think when you uproot your life geographically, a new country, a new culture, a new daily reality, everything familiar is gone, it's hard. So there's an ending there. You left something behind, your community, your familiarity, all that ease, right? And what was the neutral zone in Switzerland, in this foreign country? Was it loneliness? Yeah, it was loneliness. It was also disorientation. I didn't even know how to take the garbage out. What were the unexpected gifts? So many, I can't even tell you. I mean, we all expanded there. Everybody in my family loved that, and it was hard. And I think the thing about I've learned from expats is they're always up for an adventure. All of my expats friends were like, if we wanted life to be easy, we wouldn't have done this. But the vistas and the gifts that you could achieve because you stretched yourself or tried something new, it just expanded your thinking. I have so many ways, different ways of thinking now. I got to see people to parent differently, and it worked. Oh my gosh, there's not just one way or two ways. There were many different ways, and I got to experience that from different cultures. I want to say one thing: the people that did not make it in the expat world, and again, I had limited experience. I was only an expat for 4 years. I had many friends who are lifetime. This is their deal. They go from country to country, and I admire that lifestyle. And I could have actually hung out in the expat life a little bit longer, but things changed and we had to get back. But what I want to say is that the people who didn't make it were the ones that expected things in their host country to be the same. And I think you can apply that to a lot of things that people do. If you go from one job to another and expect it to be the same, one relationship for another, anytime you don't want the old self, the ending, this old self that was part of that ending to change and you go into this new environment, it's not going to work. So, for example, the people who didn't make it were the ones that were in Switzerland complained about the food because it wasn't spicy. I mean, the Swiss aren't known for their spicy food at all. It's not Mexico. It's not a South American country. It's not Morocco or India. I mean, so a lot of people are like, it's the food's so plain. Like, it's a valid observation. Now, if you're upset by it, I don't know what to tell you, but you're in the wrong place. And so if you expect them to have like really good Mexican food, it's just not the country for it. So there was a lot of that. The grocery store there had very limited selections comparatively to the US. I found them still to be good selections, and we would joke a little bit because it was kind of the same stuff, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the simplicity. You go to the US right now and there's 4 rows aisles of chips, of different processed chips. You just don't have that over there, and I appreciated the simplicity, and I got really good at making different meals with these foods. We had plenty to choose from, but nothing close to the US, and I found the US to be overwhelming, and I still do. It's just too much. So what surprised me about this transition was that a lot of the things that the Swiss did, I loved, and I actually really miss and wish we did that here because there were just some things that I was more suited toward. Now I'm here again in the US and I don't expect it to be that way, and I don't complain that it is because there's a new me. That new me can hold both of those truths. So, geographic, and I already said this, the research shows that people who thrive in these transitions tend to practice what's called an experimental mindset. Instead of trying to recreate what they had, they approach the new place with curiosity. What can this teach me? What can I discover here that I couldn't have found anywhere else? That's how it goes. And so, anytime you're traveling anywhere, a beginner's mind, an open mind versus it's not like it is at home is the way to go. Otherwise, you're just going to be comparing. And when you compare, you lose. Okay. So I want to talk about divorce, my divorce story. Divorce is one of those, I'm not going to tell my whole divorce story. That would be weird. But one of my most profound identity transitions, identity transition that any person can go through is the ending of a marriage and the reimagining of your life, or the ending of any very long term relationship where you saw yourself, part of your identity was part of that relationship. So the friction of divorce, just not the logistics, but the internal work. What are you losing beyond the relationship? For me, it was the familial center, right? Like we still have a family, but it's not the same as it was before. That was super hard. One of the things that I chose was consistency and routine and healthy routine because I that was wisdom coming through of this is you're gonna go in for a rocky ride, you put your seatbelt on. So what are the best things to my avail that I can do to help me navigate this and not in a way that's kind and loving despite the fact that it's not gonna be it's a tough situation. So I learned about my own resilience that I could handle the thing that I didn't think I could handle. I did not want to have my family be broken up. And so I always thought I would stay married. So there's a lot of things I learned about myself. I've learned that it's totally fun to be divorced in a good way. You get to do lots of things that you couldn't do when you're married. And I just mean that in terms of exploring more of the world on your own terms. So I want to pause here and say that anyone who's in the middle of their own version of a transition right now, specifically divorce or some sort of identity shift, you know, what I didn't know that I was doing instinctively, the exercise consistently and all that kind of stuff, it kept me tethered to myself. Not because it made everything easier, it didn't. It helped me feel like I had some agency over my life, even when things felt uncertain. So if you're in a hard transition right now, take care of yourself, take care of your body, not as a productivity hack, not to look good, as an act of self-preservation and respect. So I want to go now is just a little bit more into the mothering piece. I've moved away from my children. One is at university and the other one's going to be a senior in high school. So what I've learned about mothering from a distance is that actually something I think most empty nest parents are learning in some form. And that is that great love doesn't require constant presence. It requires consistency. It requires showing up emotionally, being the person they know that they can always call, being the safe harbor, even if the safe harbor is further away and not as proximal. And I have had to grieve the version of motherhood that I thought that I would have. I thought they would always be coming in and out the door, and they're not. That's real. I don't want to skip over that. And there are still moments where that is very difficult for me, not in a tragic or a break, but there's moments of sadness. And I accept that. I made a change and there's going to be consequences to it. I think in the long term, we're all going to be great. But does my heart hurt just like when you send your kid off to college or when they live 10 states away? Yeah, it does. But on the other side of that grief, I've found of kind of closeness with my boys, a more an adult closeness, a respect that has been its own unexpected gift. All right, I want to start to wrap this up, some more practical tools. And that is just to help people out. I talked about the body, what we can do in terms of health wise. But one is name where you are in your transition. I just got off a call with a client and we were just talking about the model of beginning neutral, ending neutral, and beginnings. It was just uncanny how I'm doing this podcast and I just needed to use this in my work. But use the bridges framework as a map. Are you in an ending? Naming things is powerful. Grieving what you're leaving. Are you in the neutral zone? Are you disoriented in between? Are you beginning to feel the stirrings of the new beginning? I'm still in transition right now in terms of so many things. I'm still in the neutral zone. I live in a place that is I like, but it's not where I'm going to end up. I have to resist the tendency of constant of looking to move because I know that I am not ready to make that decision yet. I know that there's going to be other things that come in that tell me where to move next. Will I stay in California? I don't know. I could. The point is where I am right now is not it. I know it's not. In terms of my living situation, it is always uncomfortable for people to be nested in their home. But I've made the best of this situation. It's good. It's not great and I'd like to leave, but I'm not going to solve a problem that I really don't have right now. It's in terms of priorities, this is good. So I'm still in the neutral zone. I know. Wah. I'm in new beginnings in other areas, but I'm not completely there yet. So just naming where you are takes away some of the fear. You're not lost. You're just in a known stage of the human process. So, protect your body, find that one person I talked about before that you can share with, a therapist, a trusted friend, a coach, someone who will let you just be messy without trying to fix it. You just need someone who can hold space for all the uncertainty without rushing in or projecting their own situation and answers on yourself. The other thing you can do is practice the pause. Transitions make us reactive. Making big decisions from fear or grief or urgency is not a good place to be. Before making any major decision during a transition, build in a pause. Sleep on it, pray on it, meditate on it, talk it through. Don't let the urgency of the moment dictate the direction of your life. When I moved from Washington State to California, I thought about that for 9 months. I went through it in my head. I didn't wanna do it at all. And as I sat with it and I played it out and I worked it all through, I knew I was going through a big life change and just getting up and running away or whatever it might look like, it didn't matter. But I had to figure out my work. I had to figure out where these things for myself. Kids were a big part of it. I mulled that decision over, processed it, went back and forth. It wasn't a stressful thing, but I was like, I will get clear with time. I don't need to make this decision now. I don't have to go anywhere. And then I worked it all through with my kids. So give yourself time around it. Don't create urgency where there doesn't need to be any. The other piece is really transitions take longer than you think on the subject of giving yourself time. The research shows this across the board. There's no timeline that you're behind on. Your transition is your own. And new beginnings arrive when we're internally ready, and forcing them prematurely usually leads to repeating the lesson. How many times have we seen that? And some people have other things to get over. If their divorce ended in a way that was really a betrayal or something like that, they have to heal from the betrayal and all the other stuff. So be patient with your friends or people you know that are healing from this. It might take longer for them, and that's okay. They just need to keep going, right? So stay curious about the neutral zone. That's my last advice here before I wrap this up. Instead of fighting the between area, I mean, there have been times I'm like, oh God, how much more healing do I have to do? Just get curious about it. What is this season teaching you? What's being cleared away? What's becoming possible that could not have existed in your old life? I tell you, that stuff is so great. Bridges called the neutral zone the most creative phase of the transition if we let it be. And I actually think that's exactly where I am. I'm creating and it's scary, but it's so lovely. So for all of you, don't rush it. Finally, what is the deeper truth of all these transitions? And I want to say this, and I'm going to repeat it. The self who completes the transition is not the same one who began it. You will become changed. I'm going to repeat it. The self who navigates the transition may not be the same one who completes it. I think that's one of the most important and most overlooked truths about change. We talk a lot about getting through transitions, surviving them, coming out the other side. But what we talk about less is who comes out the other side is not necessarily who went in. Something is shifted, something has been shed, and something new, sometimes something you didn't even know was possible, has taken its place. So here's what I've noticed in my own life, everyone. I could not fully see the transition while I was in it. The meaning of it, the real meaning, the deep meaning, it reveals itself over time, sometimes years later. You go through a divorce and you think you understand what happened. And 5 years later, you understand it at a completely different level. I know I've looked at pictures of myself, I'm like, I cannot believe I wore that. Or I think I love that outfit. But the thing is, I don't think now what I thought then. And so we need to be continually growing and changing. That's what the soul is here to do. I think the growth is up to you. Sky's the limit with the soul. It constantly wants to be moving and going. So you have to be able to see the patterns that you're in. You have to see what you were unwilling to look at during that last chapter. You'll see that the ending made possible what you couldn't even have imagined at the time. So reflection is not a one-time event. It deepens. The same transition can offer new layers of meaning a decade later that simply just weren't available to you when you were in the thick of it. That's not a failure of awareness in the moment. That's just how deep change works. What I've come to understand is that the real transition doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes the lens through which you see everything. What you believe about yourself shifts. What you believe you deserve shifts. What you're willing to accept, what you're no longer willing to tolerate, what you understand about love and work and identity, it all gets quietly rewritten. I don't believe the same things that I did before many of my major transitions, not about relationships, not even about what success means, not about what a good life looks like, and not about loss. That is not about loss. I mean, that even though it can feel like loss in the moment, that's growth. And that's what the work, the transition is doing for us. So, one of the most surprising gifts you'll get is over time with reflection, you can look back on your old behaviors, the one that kept you stuck with compassion instead of judgment. You, that is absolutely it. If don't look back with shame on those things. If you're looking back on shame, that means you have more work to do. You can look back with compassion towards yourself because that's what you knew best at the time. So I can look back now and see how I participated in dynamics that weren't good for me, how I made choices from fear instead of from alignment, how I stayed in situations longer than I should have because the unknown felt more terrifying than the familiar felt. I'm not ashamed of any of that. I'm not. I can understand it. I can see the version of me who was doing the best she could with what she had at the time. And that understanding, that self-compassion, that looking backward, it is itself is a product of the transition. It's what growth actually looks like. So I want to talk about the people who miss it. They rush to the next thing. We all know them. They go to the next relationship. They just get a different, same version of the old, and then they stay the same. And so I think it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in how we approach change. Some people move right through a transition and immediately rush to the next thing, the new relationship, the new job, before they process why the last one didn't work. New city with ever sitting in the question of what they really want. They move to a new place, it's just the next thing. And I understand that impulse. I think we all do. The neutral zone is uncomfortable. Being in between is hard. We want to feel okay again as quickly as possible. But when you rush through a transition without reflecting on it, you carry it with you. That's the truth. The unexamined transition becomes the unconscious pattern. And you find yourself in the same situation again, just with different characters and a different backdrop. The transition, everybody, is an invitation. It's asking something of you, it's offering something to you. And if you skip the reflection, you miss the gift. So, what does it look like to actually reflect in a transition? Really reflect on it? Here's some practices that have helped me. You can journal over time, not just in the acute phase or when you're in the hard part, but keep journaling, returning to the same hard questions every 6 months or so. So, and then talk to someone who knew you before and say, I ask people all the time, what do you think of me then? What was I, how did I appear to you? Did I seem happy? Did I this? We need somebody else to name what they saw and what they see now so we can reflect on our own growth and do this clearly with somebody you trust. You need to get quiet during a transition. It's going to be, should be a little bit more alone time than you're used to. Meditation, prayer, long walks without a podcast in. Sorry. The reflection doesn't happen in the noise. It just happens in the stillness, which is a huge part of the Live Your Jam philosophy. I think many of us try to avoid all of this, but it's just essential. And the final thing is you really need to ask hard questions, not just what happened to me, but how did I participate in this? What was I unwilling to see? What is this transition asking me to become? Those questions, those are the ones that take courage. And that's why a good coach or somebody can ask them. I ask people lots of hard questions, but they're the ones that can lead to real transformation. The self who comes out of a real transition, one that's been fully reflected on, honestly, that self is wiser, more grounded, more themselves, and less interested in performing and more interested in actually living. That's the invitation inside every hard thing that happens to us, not just to survive it, to let it change us, to let it show us something we couldn't have seen any other way. Before I go, I want to leave you with one question to sit with this week. What transition are you in right now? And are you treating yourself with love and care and patience that you would offer someone else, a dear friend? Because here's what I know after living through a few big ones. Transitions aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. They're friction that shapes you, the wilderness that prepares you, and the ending that made it all, that made that new beginning possible. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to have it figured out. You just have to take care of yourself well enough to stay clear enough to hear what your own life is asking of you next. That's it for today. Thanks for being here, everybody. If this episode resonated with you, and if you're in transition right now and you needed to hear that friction is normal, yay, friction, please share it with someone who might need it too. Until next time, keep living your jam because your soul knows the way. Thanks for listening to the Live Your Jam podcast. If today's episode sparked insight or inspiration, follow that thread. That's your inner wisdom speaking. Share this episode with a friend who'd vibe with it. And if you're moved to, leave a review so others can find their way here too. Remember, the dreams that stir within you aren't frivolous. They're instructions from your soul. You can listen on Spotify and Apple Podcast or watch the video version on YouTube to see me and my amazing guests in action. Until next time, keep listening in and keep living your jam.